It's February 14th, and while millions are celebrating Love today, global law enforcement and cybersecurity agencies have issued a red alert for a record-breaking surge in Valentine's Day scams. The FBI and FTC report that romance scams alone cost over $3 billion last year, with 2026 numbers projected to climb even higher due to the weaponization of artificial intelligence. Let's unpack this with the head of operations at the Southern African Fraud Prevention Service, Retief. Roy, thanks for your time. Not going to wish you a happy Valentine's, but I'm sure you're having a good one. So let's talk about these scammers. What is it that they're looking for?
Hugo, and good afternoon to the viewers as well. Number of things. It starts off that they're looking for information, and ultimately this translates into looking for money as well, because that's at the end of the day what these scams are all about, is duping people out of their hard-earned money. And it doesn't just stop with money. The effects can be absolutely catastrophic. Yes, it's financial loss, but it also affects people's psychological well-being and so on as well. So it has a lot more unintended consequences than just stealing people's money.
Now, when we say romance scams spike in February, what's the driving surge, and what patterns are you seeing right now? I mean, you've heard the phrase social engineering in plain language. What does that mean in a romance scam context?
Well, Hugo, we do see an increase during February, typically the month of love. But these scams are always bubbling along under the surface. But we do see an increase in February, specifically because of Valentine's Day and so on. And these scammers are typically targeting people who are vulnerable, who are battling emotionally, lonely. They might have lost a partner. They might have come out of a difficult romance or relationship, and these scammers then pick up on that and target these vulnerable people. It doesn't just happen overnight. These criminals study their victims quite intensely, quite a while before they make contact with them, to get an understanding of exactly who that person is and what, if I could call it that, what buttons to push to dupe these people into a online relationship, for want of a better word. And that's where the term social engineering comes in, because they are convincing these people that they are genuine individuals, that they are also looking for love and affection, and that they've met their ideal match.
Roy, I'm going to stop you right there and come back to this issue of social engineering. I mean, it's pretty incredible that these individuals, that these vulnerable women largely, are studied over a period. Now, that study for me would suggest in many ways that there's certain information that's available to these social engineers and ultimate scammers. What is that information that's available to them, and how do they access it?
I'd just like to point out, it's not just women that fall victim to these scams. There are a lot of guys that fall victim as well, that we don't often hear about. But typically what they will do is target social media platforms. It's not just related to romance scams, but to most scams. This is where victims are identified. We've got this unfortunate phenomenon where when we interact on a personal level, we are fairly cagey with our personal information, and we keep our details to ourselves. But social media platforms, people throw caution to the wind. And I think this is often where folk run into trouble, because unfortunately once information is out on a social media platform, for example your Facebooks, your Twitters, Instagram and so on, it is out there. I heard a very interesting analogy the other day where somebody likened social media, putting personal information on social media it's the same as putting it on a big billboard next to the highway. Everybody can see it, and it becomes incredibly difficult to get it back. And people tend to overshare on social media sites as well. And typically you'll find emotionally vulnerable people do share quite a bit of detail about their lives. For example, a relationship has come to an end, or the loss of a partner through death, for example. And this is what these criminals are looking for. And once they've identified a victim, they will then start researching that person, just working through these feeds. And people unfortunately share an incredible amount of information without really thinking about it. And this is where they then use that and approach the person and almost lull them into a false sense of security, because the victim thinks they are being understood, and there's somebody that's taking a genuine interest in them, and they know exactly what makes them tick and so on. So we find social media platforms are a huge area where these fraudsters can potentially identify victims.
We're going to, in a moment, Roy, talk about some of the red flags that both men and women should look out for. But just give us some insights into how smart these individuals are, because I think they are pretty smart. We often ask the question, geez, didn't you see it coming? You know, how do you get duped? But what we don't take into account is the amount of resource and the skill that it takes these individuals to scam those of us that have been scammed. So just give us some insights into, you know, a life in the day of a scammer, if you would. You know, what are they going through? How are they preparing to be able to dupe all these individuals?
Just like you and I have got a day job and we're professional at what we do, similar to what these criminals are doing. And they'll play the long game. It's not a quick win for them. We've seen cases where the social engineering has taken place over a number of months, if not close to a year, to build that sense of trust with the victim and you know, to draw them into the net and get them to trust the fraudster. So it's not an overnight phenomenon. They really do invest time, and as I said, they study everything about that victim before they even approach them. Often what you'll find they'll do is they'll engage the victim on a social media platform, but then they move the communication to an alternate channel, for example, WhatsApp or a dating app or something like that, where the correspondence isn't necessarily in the public domain, and in that way they're almost isolating that individual from, for example, friends and family who may also be subscribed to social media feeds that might see this and say, hang on a minute, you need to be careful, there's something fishy about this. So there is that element of isolation, and it is incredibly well planned.
All right, now as we wrap up this conversation, just walk us through some important red flags to look out for.
Firstly, be very careful about unsolicited approaches on social media channels. You know, that already should be a warning sign. Also, when people are they asking for very personal information, very sensitive information quite early on in that relationship. Second and thirdly, any approach for money. And we often think, we see examples where they'll say, for example, they need the fraudster, for example, needs money for a hospital treatment, or there's a family friend or urgent travel or so on. But the other one that they do, that they follow, is they'll try and dupe people into fraudulent investment scams as well. So once they've built that trust and that level of affection up with the potential victim, they'll start moving towards, I've got a brilliant investment scam, you can make a lot of money on this, and so on and so forth. So any approach where money comes into it, that should be an immediate red flag.
Roy Retief, appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to us on this Valentine's Day. And you've heard those words of advice. If it involves money, then there is a huge chance that it could be a scam. Stay safe.